Okay, welcome to the third instalment of The Butterfly Lion by Michael Morpurgo, which is published by HarperCollins Children's Books. So we will just continue from where we left off yesterday. The Frenchman. They were there waiting on the veranda. His mother in her nightgown, his father in his hat, his horse saddled ready to come after him. "I've set him free," Bertie cried. "I've set him free, and he won't ever have to live behind bars." He was sent to his room at once. There he threw himself on the bed and buried his face in his pillow. Day after day his father went out, looking for the white lion, but each evening he came back empty-handed and blazing with fury. What will I tell the Frenchman when he comes, eh? Did you think for 1 minute of that, Bertie? Did you? I could strap you. Any father worth his salt would strap you. But he didn't. Bertie sat all day and every day at the fence or up his tree in the compound or at his bedroom window, his eyes scanning the veld for anything white moving in the grass. He prayed at his bedside every night until his knees were numb, prayed that his white lion would learn how to kill, would somehow find enough to eat, would avoid the hyenas and other lions too, come to that. Above all, he prayed that he would not come back, not at least until the Frenchman from the circus had come and gone. The day the Frenchman came, it rained. The first rain in months, it seemed. Bertie watched him as he stood there dripping in the veranda, his thumb hooked into his waistcoat pocket. His father broke the news that there was no white lion to collect and that he had escaped. That was the moment when Bertie's mother put her hand to her throat and cried out and pointed. The white lion was wandering through the open compound gate, yowling pitifully. Bertie ran to him, fell to his knees, and held him. The lion was soaked to the skin and trembling. He was panting with hunger and so thin you could see his rib cage. They all helped rub him down and then looked as he ate ravenously. "C'est magnifique," said the Frenchman. "And white, just as you said, white as the snow, and tame too. He will come to be the star of my circus. I shall call him the Prince Blanc, the White Prince. He will have all his needs, all his wants, fresh meat every day, fresh straw every night. I love my animals, you know. They are my family, and this lion of yours will be my favourite son. Have no fear, young man. I promise you he will never be hungry again." He put his hand on his heart. "As God is my witness, I promise it." Bertie looked up at the Frenchman's face. It was a kind face, not smiling, yet earnest and trustworthy. Yet even so, it did not make Bertie feel any better. "There, you see," said Bertie's mother. "He'll be happy, and that's all that matters, Bertie, isn't it?" Bertie knew there was no point in begging. He knew now the lion could never survive on its own in the wild, that he would have to go with the Frenchman. There was nothing else for it. That night they lay in the dark together side by side. Bertie made him a last promise. "I will find you," he whispered. "Always remember, I will find you. I promise I will." The next morning the Frenchman shook hands with Bertie on the veranda and said goodbye. "He'll be fine, don't you worry. And one day you must come to France and see my circus. Le Cirque Malais. It was the best circus in all of France." Then they left the white lion in a wooden crate rocking from side to side in the back of the Frenchman's wagon. Bertie watched until the wagon disappeared from view. A few months later, Bertie found himself on a ship steaming out of Cape Town, bound for England, and school and a new life. As the last of Table Mountain vanished in the heat haze, he said goodbye to Africa. He was not at all unhappy. He had his mother with him for the time being at least, and after all, England was much nearer France than Africa. Much nearer. Strawbridge. The old lady drank her tea and wrinkled her nose in disgust. I'm always doing that, she said. I'm always letting my tea go cold. The dog scratched his ear, groaning with the pleasure of it, but eyeing me all the time. Is that the end, then? I asked. She laughed and pulled down her cup. I should say not, she said, and then she went on, picking a tea leaf off the tip of her tongue. Up till now, it's been just Bertie's story. He told it to me so often that I almost feel I was there when it happened. But from now on, it is my story too. But what about the White Lion? I had to know. Did he find the White Lion? Did he keep his promise? The old lady seemed suddenly clouded with sadness. You must remember, she said, putting a bony hand on mine, that true stories do not always end just as we wish they would. Would you like to hear the truth of what happened, or shall I make something up just to keep you happy? I want to know what really happened, I replied. Then you shall, she said. She turned from me and looked out of the window again at the butterfly lion, still blue and shimmering on the hillside. Whilst Bertie was growing up on his farm in Africa with a fence all around, I was growing up here in Strawbridge, in this echoing, cold cavern of a house with its deer park and its high wall all around. And I grew up for most part alone. I too was an only child. My mother had died giving birth to me, and my father was rarely at home. Maybe that was why the two of us, Bertie and I, got on so well from the first moment we met. We had so much in common from the very start. Like Bertie, I scarcely ever left the confines of my home, so I had very few friends. I didn't go to school either, not to start with. I had a governess instead, Miss Tulips. Everyone called her No Lips, because she was so thin-lipped and severe. She moved around the house like a cold shadow. She lived on the top floor like cook and like nanny. Nanny Mason, bless her heart, brought me up and taught me all the do's and don'ts of life, like a good nanny should. But she was more than just a nanny to me. She was a mother to me, and a wonderful one too. The best I could have had, the best anyone could have had. My mornings were always spent at my studies with No Lips, but all the while I was looking forward to my afternoons out walking with Nanny Mason, except on Sundays when I was allowed to be on my own all day. If Father wasn't home for the weekend, which he usually wasn't, I could fly my kites when it was fine and read my books when it wasn't. I loved my books, Black Beauty, Little Women, Heidi. I loved them all because they took me outside of the park walls. They took me all over the world. I met my best friends I ever had in those books, until I met Bertie, that is. I remember it was just after my 10th birthday. It was Sunday, and I was out flying kites. But there wasn't much wind, and no matter how hard I ran, I just couldn't get even my best box kite to catch the wind and fly. I climbed all the way up Wood Hill, looking for wind, and there at the top I found it at last, enough to send my kite soaring. But then the wind gusted and my kite swirled away crazily towards the trees. I couldn't haul it in time. It got caught on a branch and stuck fast in a high elm tree amongst the rookery. The rooks flew out, cawing in protest, whilst I tugged my line, crying in my fury and frustration. I gave up, sat down and howled. That was when I noticed a boy emerging from the shadows of the trees. "I'll get you down. I'll get it down for you," he said, and began to climb the tree. Easy as you like, he crawled along the branch, reached out and released my kite. It floated down and landed at my feet. My best kite was torn and battered, but at least I had it back. Then he was down the tree and standing there in front of me. "Who are you? What do you want?" I asked. "I can mend it if you like," he said. "Who are you?" I asked again. "Bertie Andrews," he replied. He was wearing a grey school uniform, and one I recognised at once. From the Lion Gateway I'd often watched them on their walks, 2 by 2, blue school caps, blue socks. "You're from the school up the road, aren't you? You won't tell me, will you? You won't tell on me, will you?" His eyes were wide with sudden alarm. I saw then his legs were scratched and bleeding. Been in the wars, have you? I said. I've run away, he went on, and I'm not going back, not ever. Where are you going? I asked. He shook his head. I don't know. In the holidays I live with my auntie in Salisbury, but I don't like it there. Haven't you got a proper home? I asked. Of course I have, he replied. Everyone has. But it's in Africa. That whole afternoon we sat together on Wood Hill, and he told me all about Africa, about his farm, about his waterhole, about his white lion, and how he was everywhere, somewhere in France now, in a circus, but he couldn't bear to think about it. But I'll find him, he said fiercely. I'll find him somehow. To be honest, I wasn't sure how much I really believed all this about a white lion. I just didn't think lions could be white. But the trouble is, he went on, even when I do find him, I won't be able to take him home to Africa like I always wanted to. Why not? I asked. Because my mother died. He looked down and pulled at the grass beside him. She had malaria, but I think she really died of a broken heart. When he looked up, his eyes were swimming with tears. You can, you know. Then my father sold the farm and married someone else. I never want to go back. I never want to see him again. Never. I wanted to say how sorry I was about his mother, but I couldn't find the right words to say it. And you really live here, do you? He said. In that big place. It's as big as my school. I told him then what there was to know about me, all about father being away in London, so much about No Lips and Nanny Mason. He sucked at the purple clover as I talked, and when neither of us had any more to say, we lay back in the sun and watched a pair of mewing buzzards wheeling overhead. I was wondering what would happen to him if he got caught. What are you going to do? I said at last. Won't you get into trouble? Only if they catch me. But they will, they're bound to in the end, I said. You've got to go back before they miss you. After a while he propped himself up on his elbow and looked down at me. Maybe you're right, he said. Maybe they won't have missed me yet, maybe it's not too late. But if I go back, could I come again? I can face it, if I can come again. Would you let me? I'll mend your kite, I really will. And he gave me a smile so melting that I couldn't refuse him. It was arranged. We would meet under the big wych elm on Wood Hill every Sunday afternoon at 3, or as close to 3 as he could. He would have to come through the woods so that he could never be seen from the house. I knew full well that if No Lips ever found out, there'd be merry hell to pay, for both of us probably. Bertie shrugged and said that if he got caught, all they could do at school was beat him, but once more wouldn't make much difference anyway. And if they expelled him, well, then that would suit him just fine. Okay, that's enough for today, and I will see you tomorrow.